Remember Twain's World. Remember to pause. Oh, you're not even going to be. I'm going to pause the YouTube. If it comes up on yours YouTube, you can pause it. I'm going to pause mine.
Do I have to do anything?
I don't think so.
It says meeting is now streaming on YouTube.
It is. If people are watching, we're just getting prepared. So give us a second while we figure all of this stuff out. And I think we're live. I'm going to ask for John to let us know here to make sure we're doing something. We're getting out of the chat is up. John, are we live?
7:30. John's cooking it. We got Chez Pascal.
Yeah.
We're all set.
Everybody's getting their dinner. Anybody? I'm not hearing from John yet. It says live on YouTube. I hope we're going. Someone send me a message that says everything is good and we'll get going, just to make sure that we're not talking into the ether here, which I have done on more than one occasion in this.
Yelling down a well.
Yeah, down the well. Quarantine lockdown. In our Wayne's World.
Shakespeare.
Are we on?
Shakespeare's World.
Still waiting to hear.
7:31.
7:31. Oh, yes. Audrey just said hello. Hello, Audrey. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We are live. Okay, everybody. Hello and welcome to Brush Up Your Shakespeare, episode, I believe, 6. I even called it our second season because we had a little hiatus last week. And if you can see, we've got a new set and a special guest star. Only our second and our first of this season. Here I am in a different time. So here we are, Friday evening. We're going to get going in just a second. This episode, we're going to focus on, something we haven't really yet. We've been talking a lot about tragedy and stuff in terms of the language and a lot of verse. Today, we're going to talk about comedy. And we're going to talk about a lot of prose. And we're going to do that with our great friend and colleague, Fred Sullivan Jr., who, along with myself and many of our friends over at the GAM, has been, primarily responsible for so much of the Shakespeare we've done. And I don't know, Freddie, how long has it been? It's been over 20 years now that we've been doing it just at the GAM, which is pretty incredible. So we'll talk about that.
First look for Hamlet in 1996.
That's right. That's right. And so people are hey, everybody who's I got the chat over here to my right, and I'm going to kind of be looking at that for questions as we go through this and comments, and so we can keep a conversation going. Before we get going, this is a bit of a different time for us because we are partnering up with our good friends, Kristen and Matt at Chez Pascal, who every week on a Friday do dinner and a movie. And this week they wanted to do dinner and some theater. And so thank you, Kristen and Matt, for the great food and the support over so many years. And I know some people out there have are probably watching us and eating their incredible meal tonight. Which I'm going to enjoy as soon as this is over. But we thank you. And we want to, encourage all of our supporters to get out there and support Chez Pascal. If you're not eating Chez Pascal tonight, if you're eating McDonald's or you're eating your home cooked meal, whatever you're eating, we hope you're enjoying having a drink and come and enjoy some Shakespeare this evening with us. So thanks everybody for joining, and we're going to get going. So like I said, the first several episodes of this, we've looked at Hamlet, we've looked at Romeo and Juliet, we looked at Macbeth, we looked at some of the history stuff with some of the chorus things, and we talked about, then we celebrated his birthday 2 weeks ago, and here we are, and yet haven't really kind of looked squarely at a lot of the comedy, and we haven't looked at prose. We've been talking a lot about verse and how verse works, and just to remind everybody what the focus of this Brush Up Your Shakespeare has been is 2 things that I've kind of said as the mission statement of this. And one, of course, is, how do we kind of take away any of the fear that as audience members or as, people coming to Shakespeare that you might have had because you had a bad teacher in high school or college, or you had a bad director and you're working on your, as an actor, and then for those of us who kind of want to do Shakespeare or want to know more or love it, a few things about how to make the language clear and how to kind of, to tell us and kind of internalize the fact that he's still speaking in our language, and there's no reason to come in and think that we're going to go and we're going to be hearing, Esperanto. That's not what it is. And so welcome, Fred. We're going to talk comedy today, and maybe we could start off, Fred. I want to throw this over to you and just say, you've been teaching for so long and directing and acting for so long, and I'm sure this
So
question,
long,
so
so
long,
long,
so long. Look at those white hairs.
so long. Yeah, earned.
What is, the question that I get all the time, people automatically want to kind of compartmentalize so they can understand, right? And so they really separate the comedy and the tragedy and the comedy and the history and how different are they? How's that for a question?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
You should have warned me. I would say that the people in colleges who taught me always said one ends at a wedding and one ends at a funeral. That's the glib way to talk
Yeah.
about it. The language is different, the characters are different. However, as we know, how I always look at his work is through two things. I'm fascinated by his resident company, which was 12 to 18 people that he wrote for. I was a member of a resident company for 35 years. Shakespeare's was about 22 years, and he had between 12 and 18 people, including the musicians. I always looked at his work through a lens of who he was writing for, who he had. We know very little about it because Ben Jonson was much more advanced at writing who played who down. But you can I have worked on 50 productions of Shakespeare, 28 of the 37. And 30 of those 50 were clowns. I mean, on some level. I mean, if you consider Jake and As You Like It a clown, but I've also played Touchstone. I played Toby and Malvolio. I've played, So there's a lot of parts under the belt. I started with Stefano and Bottom when I was 15 years old. I went to Tranio and Petruchio in the same production, but the star got sick. Malvolio, the clown in The Winter's Tale, Touchstone, Falstaff in both Henry IV and
we'll get to that a little bit later. Yeah.
Yes, Pompey, which is
sure.
a Measure for Measure. The Gravedigger in Hamlet is a clown. They say enter two clowns. We'll talk about that. Nick Bottom again, Jake Toby Belch, Paroles, which is All's Well That Ends Well, who's kind of a Malvolio figure, and the Prince of Aragon and Gratiano. Oh God, I lost the second page. Malvolio again, Casca, who's the only funny
part. It's Julius.
Atala, Furnace, Bottom again. And so I've done a lot of comedy. And what is the difference?
What about the clown in Winter's Tale? Did you put him in there too?
I did. I played the clown in Winter's Tale, and I played Autolycus for the GAM.
Right.
At the GAM, Tony was Leontes. Tony has played far more serious leads than I have. I've made my bread and butter doing a lot of funny guys, but I also have done some dramatic characters, about 10 of them.
Yeah.
But they usually call me up when they need a Falstaff.
So when talking about, you just threw the word clown out there, which is interesting, right? Because, he sometimes calls them clown. That's, like you said, that's in the script. It says clown. And within the kind of comic pantheon of comic characters, we've got comic leads and very, bright kind of comic, there's the big difference of Falstaffs and the Rosalinds versus the clown parts. And then, of course, other than clowns, we also have the professional clowns or fools.
Exactly, which are fools. Yeah. So we can't really say Bottom's a fool, even though he's foolish.
Yeah.
That the distinction with the other thing that besides his company that I always think of is the history, the chronological history, because I believe there are 4 distinct periods or plateaus in Shakespeare's writing. Yeah. Right in the middle there is a golden age that people will celebrate forever in 1601. But he starts in 1598, 1599, whatever. And he's doing, the clowns are born in a very interesting way. Out of, you can tell the Dromios and the Gremios and the Launce and Speed are all kind of servants. And that comes from the Roman comedy and the Commedia dell'arte, which is all Italian, all born out of Greek comedy. Aristophanes goes to the Romans, trickles down to, a couple of hundred years later to the Commedia dell'arte. And Shakespeare is very influenced by that. At the time, Ben Jonson is writing a lot of clowns, the clever, tricky servant like Mosca. And we have a lot of historical goodies. Like we know that Shakespeare's company always put on Ben Jonson. And so all of his guys, you can tell who the clowns were in his plays because they played those parts in Jonson's, and we have records of that. So the working class domestics, they echo what the people connected to the court does. The clowns or buffoons are usually working class. The most famous of those are the mechanicals in this early period. The mechanicals are invented actually in 1595, which is the first plateau, which is the biggest change in character and language.
And if anybody out there, if you don't, mechanicals doesn't ring a bell, those are all the guys in Midsummer Night's Dream that hang out with Bottom and put on the play.
Peter Quince and Tom Snout and all of those guys, the Lion and the Wall and the Moon. And we're going to start with them, but the Fools are a very special category. They didn't come along until after Hamlet. So the first fool, actually, the first jester is in Hamlet, is Yorick, but he's not in the play, just his skull. But then we move on to the new actor, 1599, the last character that Will Kemp, the great clown of the first part of Shakespeare's years. The first 10 years were Will Kemp, who was a dancer, who was an improviser, which is why in Hamlet, they say, don't let the clown speak more than
I'm going to read that one out loud. It's a good one. Yeah.
Because Will Kemp is out of control, adding in 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there. And all of a sudden he leaves and is dead shortly thereafter by the plague, nothing personal.
Here we go. Right.
1603. But in 1599, he leaves. And the greatest clown of the ages is Robert Talton, I believe, and he recommends a guy named Richard Arman, who comes in and takes over Dogberry. But that kind of malapropism of using the puns and the words confusedly doesn't fit well with Robert Arman, because he's a beautiful singer, he's a wit rather than a clown, and so Shakespeare starts writing a new version, and the fools come in. They're introduced. Touchstone is first, then I got a list somewhere, but Touchstone is first, then Festi, in the golden age there. And then we get I've got it all written down here, but I don't know where they are. So
later will come the Fool and Lear, and then you get Lavache.
Lavache isn't quite the professional club, but yes, they get into the Lavache and Thersites.
Thersites, right, in Troilus.
Now that's what I'm talking about, the phases, because that's about the next to last phase, and those fools, they're clowns. They get so dark. They always talk about death and the devil and hell and nothingness. It gets so dark right around that. And Robert Arman was, we think, all of them. Right. He might not have been Trinculo, the last fool, because we don't know if I think he was still there. I think he was there 2 years after Shakespeare.
And speaking of Trinculo is a professional fool and a clown, and hanging out with Stefano and Caliban mostly in The Tempest. And we're keeping our fingers crossed that this summer at the Commonwealth Shakespeare Theater, our good friends up in Boston, where Fred has been a resident actor and director for many, many, many years now. Fred's going to be playing Stefano, if goodness willing, this summer.
We got a note today that it was still on, that the mayor is canceling parades, but evidently it doesn't count sitting 6 feet away from your nearest audience member. So we're still on as of today. We'll let you know.
The Tempest up in the park at
Boston Common, end of July.
In July. So hopefully we'll keep our fingers crossed that can happen, and that it can happen safely. But you get to see Fred play Stefano, which was the first clown, right? Where you just said when you were 15, right? So that's coming back to that. And Fred directed Tempest for us almost 20 years ago now, or maybe 20 years ago. I can't even get the dates right. Which I was got to play Stefano in that, and one of the first clowns. Well, after the Lair, I suppose.
The first thing we ever did together was a clown, of course. A love letter to Moliere. But the second one was Stefano, I believe, and we sat down next to each other, and you said, "How do I do this?" And I said, "It's a specialty act."
It's a specialty. It scared the living hell out of me, I'll tell you that.
It's a drunk act,
It's a drunk act.
You got to be Foster Brooks.
Get to Dudley Moore. So let's talk about, we want to start off, different kinds. Obviously, there's a lot of complexity within these characters too, and we talk about comic and we expect to laugh, of course, but they're real characters and they've got a lot going on and they're all over the map in terms of kind of what they serve in the plays. And so we're going to look at two here to begin with that Fred has played on more than one occasion, I think each, Malvolio and Bottom. Nick Bottom in Midsummer, and Malvolio, of course, whose name gives him some of his personality away. Ill Will in
the opposite of Benvolio.
Yeah, and so let's take a look at. Let's start with them. One does have, one speaks in a little bit of, uses a little verse when he's as an actor, and the other is completely a prose part. What can you tell us, Fred, about the differences as in your own kind of coming? How do you approach prose any different than you look at a verse role?
Well, ironically, it's so much harder, which many actors will tell you that verse, when you go off it, know when you're wrong. And verse, prose, it's more like people talk, and he's such a great writer that it's kind of, you can't say it any better way. Right. But it can get confusing because it gets thick. Yeah. And he's writing also in an anti-poetic way, because usually these buffoons and they're idiots, some of them. They're well-meaning idiots in this case. Bully Bottom is a big child, right, and is an egomaniac, and but a sweet one, not one that Peter Quince might tell you different, because he's the director of the Play Within a Play, Peter Quince, and he's smart enough to know that he needs Bully Bottom. They call him Bully Bottom because he won't shut up, and he interrupts everything, and he has such a huge appetite and a type A personality that they're like, oh, get him, because we need somebody who could be heard in a large space. We need somebody who has such an appetite that he'll take over the room. And there's some, hardships dealing with a character like that, and Peter Quince is the foil. So like we've always had Abbott and Costello, we have all kinds of clowns that we know from our golden age as Americans. W.C. Fields and the Marx Brothers and the Three Stooges, they're all different types of clowns, but they are clowns. The silent ones, Charlie Chaplin, are kind of sad, and so we have sad clowns and smart clowns and stupid clowns and overbearing clowns, and so does Shakespeare. They all come from the Commedia dell'arte, which are, even Malvolio talks about Feste and says he's like a zany. He's like a senseless idiot, which is part of the Commedia dell'arte. They had Arlecchino, the really smart one. They had Biondello, which was the kind of sweet one. There's all different kinds of clowns. Bottom is the type A. Yeah. So they're divvying up the parts. Do we want to get into text right now?
Yes,
I think
absolutely. We do.
So he takes over Quince's rehearsal. Nick Bottom, the Weaver. They all are working men who love the theater. So they are the greatest thing. The word love in Latin is amo amato, which is amateur. So they are amateur theater people, and hilarious because they are so unsophisticated that they think they're really sophisticated and come up with avant-garde, but literal translations of how do you bring on the moon? How do you bring on a wall? Anyway, so they're giving out the parts, and Peter Quince says, "You, Bully Bottom, will play Pyramus." They're doing Pyramus and Thisbe, which is like Romeo and Juliet. And so he goes, "Oh, that will ask some tears in the true performing of it. If I do it, let the audience look to their eyes. I will move storms. I will condole in some measure." So the rest, he thinks he's done, and then he goes, "Yet my chief humor is for a tyrant. I could play Hercules rarely, or depart to tear a cat in to make all split. The raging rocks and shimmering shocks shall break the locks of prison gates, and Phoebus' car shall shine from far and make and mar the foolish fates." This is lofty. Yeah. Now, name the rest of the players. That was Hercules' vein. That was a tyrant's vein. A lover is more condoling. So Quince, the director, moves on and from Nick, and when Nick lets him, and describes the love interest. And so all of a sudden he goes, oh, oh, if I may hide my face, let me play Thisbe too. I'll speak in a monstrous little voice. Disney, Disney. Oh, Pyramus, lover dear, thy Thisbe dear, and lady dear. Peter Quint shuts that down and keeps telling him that he's mispronouncing the character's name. Thisbe is not the name.
No.
So then he goes on. They all decide how to do the moon and the wall by personifying them, and the kind of, as I said, an avant-garde way. They get very excited about it.
Right.
They're gonna, but they need a lion, and he describes what the lion has to do. And he goes, "Oh, oh, let me play the lion too. Oh, I will roar that I will do any man's heart good to hear me. I will roar that I will make the Duke say, let him roar again. Let him roar again." And then they decide that he has to play Pyramus. They go to his ego and say, it has to be a sweet-faced man with a big voice. And he goes, okay, I'll do it. We will meet. And there we may rehearse most obscenely and courageously. Take pains, be perfect, adieu. And that's Bottom's introduction.
Yeah, and that's quite an introduction, which we get to see come to fruition at the end of the play when he performs Pyramus, of course, in probably the most famous comic scene in all of Western literature.
And there's a lot of great clowns, including great actors. Like Charles Laughton was a famous Bottom. So was Ralph Richardson. But we in America got Burt Lahr.
Yeah.
Who played the Cowardly Lion in The Wizard of Oz. And who wouldn't want a time machine to see that?
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
He comes in and says, sweet moon, I thank thee for thy sunny beams. I thank thee, moon, for shining now so bright. For by thy gracious, golden, glittering gleams, I trust to take of truest Thisbe's sight. But stay, oh, spite! But mark, poor knight, what dreadful dole is here? Eyes, do you see? Oh, how can it be? Thy mantle good, what, stained with blood? Approaching furies fell, oh fates come, cut thread, and thrum, quell, crush, conclude, and quell. Oh, wherefore nature didst thou lion's frame, since lion vile hath here deflowered, my dear. And upstairs you hear somebody go, devoured.
Devoured, yeah.
Which was the fairest dame that lived, that loved, that liked, that looked with cheer. Come tears, confound, out sword, and wound. And every production they can't find the sword. Yeah. The pap of Pyramus, aye, the left pap, where heart doth hop. Thus I die. Thus. I am dead. Now am I fled. My soul is in the sky. Tongue, lose thy light. Moon, take thy flight. He wants to be alone for his big death. Now, die! And Charles Laughton did 15 minutes.
Yeah.
That is the Pyramus death scene, which after he dies, Francis Flute is another clown.
Yeah.
And comes in dressed as a woman and usually steals the show with the scene over the dead body of Bottom. And then Bottom sits up and explains the ending to the Duke. Yeah. So they're great in heart and inexperienced of talent.
And then they get a pension, right? I mean, it works out for them. They get a little, they get a pension.
They end with a dance.
And they end with
a dance and a wedding. And it's one of the greatest comedies ever written.
We were talking earlier and you said, it's funniest when Lucy really wants to get her foot out of the pot, and so
Robert Lewis taught comedy and said, it's only funny if Lucy really wants to get her foot out of the bucket, which is meaning if you really, really want to do your action.
Right.
And the action of all of these three clowns is pleasing a royal, which I hate to bring up, but they are low, low born, or one's a knight, but he's a drunken knight who never works. They really want to get in the good in court. And Nick Bottom, who's a weaver, wants to win a prize and get money from the Duke in this kind of contest, a best play festival. And the Duke pities them, appreciates them. There's
Yeah.
long speeches about what we do for love and how that gives it a certain amount of honor.
Well, I just want to look at the comments and questions for a second, and everybody's talking about the food they're eating from Chez Pascal, which is great because Kristen and Matt did a great thing with Elizabethan style stuff, so you can kind of feel like groundlings right now. And those of you who have seen plays at Shakespeare's Globe at the recreation there, it's just a magical space. One thing, having had the privilege of seeing a few myself, the clowns play in that space so incredibly well because they've got the permission to connect directly with the audience in a way that that has an incredible improvisatory quality. Always best when they stay with Shakespeare and don't try to venture too far away. But Audrey asks, Fred, what are the challenges in performing a role like Bottom when you're in a scene with a whole group of comedic characters? So many Shakespearean clowns are surrounded by more dramatic. So like, there's a lot of clowns in one scene, the clown car comes out. And then how does one, you've been in several where, competition can ensue, I would suppose.
There's a lot of clowns. And my happiest, in those, it started in, I believe, Love's Labor's Lost, when all of those different clowns, that was the first time he stopped being kind of Italian and started embracing the Englishness of these people. They say they're in Rome, they say they're in France, they say they're all over the place, but these are Cockney working people. In Love's Labor's Lost, all the clowns come together to put on a play called what is it? The Seven Nasties?
Yeah,
I forget. I was in it, but it's a kind of a poor man's Pyramus at this.
Yeah, it's not quite.
Wonderful. That's what Shakespeare tried out everything in Love's Labor's Lost that you see better in a later play. But the clowns come together. There's a lot of them, but they each get their turn. They each get their moment in the sun to be hilarious.
Yeah.
And we all kind of are on stage watching each other be hilarious. And that's, if you get a bunch of generous actors, which is the greatest thing in the world. I have been Nick Bottom 3 times. Most of the time I get the greatest generous. People don't try to upstage each other. They try to, you can figure out where the joke is and how it builds. And a smart group will say, oh, well, this fight is between Peter Quince, who is Abbott, and Bottom, who is Costello, and the rhythm of that has to be, if they all interrupt and want their moment of the sun in the middle of it, it could ruin the stew. Absolutely. They all in that play have their moment too. They really
as you pointed out about the Pyramus at Thisbe, the thing that in all the my favorite productions of watching it and having been in it once, when Flute comes out and, as you say, steals the show, it's because he breaks your heart, because he cares,
Yeah, he also, and then speaking of that, and it's very important to talk about these clowns, is that Shakespeare didn't just take the Commedia dell'arte, characters, he made them human. And so if we say this is the invention of the human, the difference between what Moliere and Shakespeare did to the Commedia characters is give them incredible, unforgettable language. So when Bottom wakes up from the dream, if you're not touched by that and moved by that this kind of idiot doesn't understand what he went through and how this was as happy as he gets. He was treated like a king by the Queen of the Fairies, even though he had a donkey's head. He was animalistic. He was one with nature. He was celebrated. He was loved. And that is when he wakes up, it's very touching. And then when Flute, who actually is a very good amateur actor, starts to actually cry over this buffoon Bottom's death. You laugh so hard at death with Bottom, and then you see the consequences of actual death when the actress, a man dressed as a woman, comes in, and usually great flutes express loss. And in the middle of a comedy, you start thinking about death seriously, and you're quite moved. And then we go back to the burger mask, But Shakespeare is very, very smart with the balance.
Yeah, we wouldn't be the first to point out that there's something, that play within the play Pyramus at Thisbe may be the most, kind of, brilliant piece of theatrical writing like ever. It's foolproof. It just, the way it works is because he hits you both ways, and he always does that in his greatest plays. Speaking of which, jumping in, we wanted to kind of look at. Go ahead.
But I was just going to say, and I think this will be part of your segue,
Yeah.
is that the most, I mean, those are 6 clowns with 2 major clowns in the 6.
Yeah.
The most even play with a large group of clowns, and any of them can steal the show at any time, is Twelfth Night, which in 1601, Shakespeare had a very good year, as the actor would say. He wrote Richard II, which is someday going to be done by the GAM, but he also wrote Hamlet, which some call the world's greatest tragedy, and he wrote Twelfth Night, which some call the world's greatest comedy. There is no question in this, and the balance. And if you study Hamlet, you know that Hamlet himself and Polonius are hilarious. They are hilarious, and when they do exchanges to each other, you can't believe when he's acting mad how funny he is and how witty he is when he's not. You know, talk about a wise fool. Polonius is one of the most complex characters in the world. Some say he's based on a court figure who everybody knew about, but he is a politician, and with all that implies. He can be the kind of the most thick-headed guy in the world because he believes in what he's doing, but he also believes so much in what he's doing that he's tricky, and so he's like the tricky servant. He's hilarious anyway. And if
by indirections find directions out is his big.
He thinks he's so smart, which is really God laughing at us all, right? Whenever we think we're so on top of everything, is when we get stabbed behind a curtain. And then in that play, which 2 clowns are written in Hamlet, and they are the gravediggers. So this is where it starts to get very dark. In his comedy Twelfth Night, he has Sir Toby, which is a Falstaffian character, is written after Falstaff, and less of a Falstaff, but certainly dangerous and hilariously funny in that, like Falstaff, lives for cakes and ale, is a life force, is a liar, is a person who takes people who are not as bright as him and convinces them to give him everything they have. I had Andrew Aguecheek, who there was an actor who they had, William Sly, I think his name was. No, anyway, there's an actor that they had in the company who was very skinny. Oh God, I have all the names, but in the original first folio, there are 26 names of the actors who first brought these to life. The first 12 founded what became the King's Men, which was the Lord Chamberlains. And so it's very interesting to go through all the research and find out, how you could put these all together. Anyway, they had a very skinny guy who played Slender and played Justice Shallow and played, and this guy is amazing in this play. Where was I, Tony?
On all the clown car, that even
the clown car comes Mariah, and comes Feste, who is a jester, is a professional, so sings but also speaks truth to power. Which is an amazing thing. Then we have, and we think Jaques was written just before Hamlet. There was a certain melancholy in that he's not technically a clown, but we think Burbage played him because they were getting ready to do Hamlet. And then right after Hamlet comes Twelfth Night, and there's this character of Malvolio, which is he is the steward in the Countess Olivia's house once again. And we know from all these plays that William Shakespeare hated and resented, ironically, because he was really out to buy his family a crest, but he hated people who kissed ass at court. They called them time servers. And this guy, it's not like the poor mechanicals who are coming to entertain at the Duke's house and just want to, get a little money and a little applause. This guy, we find out the only time when he's alone on stage that he really wants to have all the power. He wants to marry the Countess and become Count Malvolio. So we're going to go on to him, as even though Feste is the fool, there are about 5 other clowns, and Malvolio is the part. You know how good a part is if the actor managers in the 19th century picked them to play themselves.
Yeah.
And they all wanted to play. Nobody wanted to play Orsino.
Yeah.
Everybody, which is ironic because the one I just watched, Orsino was the best thing in it.
Yeah.
But it's hard not to be great as Malvolio because it is the greatest comic part. And we're going to jump right into him.
Yeah.
We're going to do a little of the letter scene.
Letter scene.
To
Yeah.
set him up.
Sure. Yeah. So as you know, the connecting him to Bottom is interesting as well. Very, very different guys. But both, when we talk about the way they spin against the spin against the way they drive, Malvolio is ill will. Malvolio is a time server. Malvolio has ambitions to be above his station, of course, which is always dangerous in these plays. And he's usually, you are hated for it. He also comes to represent a certain puritanical mindset that's against kind of freedom and fun and cakes and ale and all that stuff that wants, and is famously tortured, basically.
Yeah, well, he's the anti-Falstaff.
Yeah.
And in order to find, you and I have worked on Much Ado About Nothing twice, and what we found out was that in Much Ado About Nothing, it becomes a kind of a tragedy, a serious play in Act 4. So how do you do this frothy genius, maybe in the top 3 comedies ever written by Shakespeare? How do you do the balance of earning Act 4?
Right.
And so when you're playing Malvolio, you always have to have 2 things that you have to earn. One is he's so mean. He hates Toby so much that hate is actually what is driving him to a certain point. He thinks that if he can conquer his enemy, he can get all the power and win. So, my teacher used to call the speech before the letter the Nazi daydream, which is a little intense, but he has to be not just goofy. I saw the other thing that I wanted to say, and the 2 things you have to be careful of, is when he comes out in the middle of the night, which is the famous Cakes and Ale interruption. They're having this great party.
Right, middle of the night. Yep.
In the Stratford version, the late Brian Dennehy and Stephen Oumet were so fantastic doing Hold Thy Peace that you never wanted that party to end. Yeah. And then out comes the Puritan at 2 o'clock in the morning and puts on the lights and screams, "My masters, are you mad or what are you?" And then the war begins. He picks on Maria so meanly because he has power over her that Toby swears revenge. And that's where the letter begins. That's where the torture begins. That's where all that, but he has to earn it. The other thing is that in that, I actually saw a production once where his pajamas were like a Dr. Seuss outfit and silly and funny. And then where do you go from there?
Yeah, you don't.
He's a Puritan. He has to be, if he's in night clothes, it has to be a very severe night gown or a robe or whatever it is. It can't be like silly hat and striped socks. And because if the socks are funny,
then the cross garters are
my friends, there's no way to go. The play is over. So anyway, he's out walking in the garden on Olivia's
estate.
Got my letter right here on her estate. Absolutely. He is a sour face. He first enemy he makes in the play is Feste, who he puts down and says he's no better than the fool Zane. He's gagged. He doesn't even know what to say if you criticize him. He's really not funny at all. And so he makes an enemy out of Feste, and then he makes an enemy out of Toby and Maria and Aguichi, who he hardly even notices is there because he's one of the lighter people. So here we go. This is I don't know, there might be a couple of minutes, but here we go. He's walking out all by himself. The only time.
And this is a letter that they planted. For those of you who maybe don't know the story, that they've planted that he thinks comes from Olivia.
The Countess.
He may love him.
Maria says, "I can write just like my lady," and I'm going to write a love letter to him. But they make it into kind of a Rubik's Cube of hints to see if he can put them together. So, here we go. This is Malvolio. He's very, very serious.
Very serious.
"'Tis but fortune. All is fortune. Maria once told me she did affect me, and I have heard herself come thus near that should she fancy it would be one of my complexion. Besides, she uses me with a more exalted respect than anyone else that follows her. What should I think, aunt, to be Count Malvolio? There is example for it. The lady of the stretcher married the yeoman of the wardrobe. Having been 3 months married to her, sitting in my state, calling my officers about me in my branched velvet gown, having come from a day bed where I have left Olivia sleeping. And then to have the humor of state, and after a demure travel of regard, telling them I know my place, as I would they should know theirs, to call for my kinsman, Toby. 7 of my people with an obedient start make out for him. I frown the while and perchance wind up my watch or play with some rich jewel. Toby approaches, he curtsies, there to me. I extend my hand to him, thus saying, Cousin Toby, my fortunes having cast me on your knees, give me this prerogative of speech. You must amend your drunkenness. But what employment have we here? By my life, this is my lady's hand. These be her C's, her U's, and her T's. And thus makes she her great P's. It is a contempt to question her hand. To the unknown beloved, this and my good wishes. Why, her very phrases. By your leave, wax. Soften the impressure her Lucrece with which she uses to seal. It is my lady. To whom should this be? Jove knows I love, but who? Lips do not move, no man must know, no man must know. What follows? The numbers altered, no man must know. If this should be thee, Malvolio. I may command where I adore, but silence like a Lucrece knife with bloodless stroke, my heart doth gore. M-O-A-I doth sway my life. M-O-A-I doth sway my life. Nay, but first, let me see. I may command where I adore. Why, she may command me. I serve her. She is my lady. Why, there is no obstruction in this. And the end, what should that alphabetical position portend? If I could make that resemble something in me. Softly. M-O-A-I. Maria, my I. Mo AI. Mo Malvolio! Why, that begins my name. M, but then there is no consistency in the sequel that suffers under probation. A should follow, but O does, and then I comes behind. M-O-A-I. This simulation is not as the former, and yet to crush this a little, it would bow to me, for every one of these letters is in my name. Soft, here follows prose. If this fall into thy hand.
Good.
What?
Only because I don't want to run out of time here, and I want to make sure we can get to the things. So I'm going to stop there for that. That's incredible. And what you said something earlier that I love, and that connects to this about Bottom and him, about we connect here with Malvolio, who we've hated throughout the show because he wants to be loved desperately, and someone might love him, and to watch that awakening in someone and then have it crushed.
Well, the greatest moment is in the second half. He says that all of this, she manifests herself to my love, and with a kind of injunction drives me to these habits of her liking. I thank my stars. I am happy.
Yeah.
And it brings down the house. I am happy. And then when he tries to, she does a postscript and says, you should go smiling through the day. I love your smile. Yeah. This is a guy who hasn't smiled in 15 years. Yeah. So he forces out a smile like he's constipated. Yeah. And then says, I will smile. I will do everything that thou shalt have me. This piece, if done by a clown, by a comic, and there have been many geniuses who have played this part over the years, including Olivier, should bring down the house 4 or 5 times. It is definitely the part you should think about taking a intermission afterwards because
Right.
it's a showstopper.
Yeah.
It's the Mama Rose number.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, I remember, I
Then
think
there's a
that,
wonderful sword fight between,
yeah,
Aguichi and Viola in the second act, which is magnificent. I mean, there is such comic, wonderful, lazzi, which
yeah.
is the Italian word for, bits.
Bits.
That
Yeah.
so wonderful. Anyway, the letter scene is
Oh,
great.
it's
And
astonishing.
Malvolio, then he gets tortured, and then he comes in, and we said like about Flute and Bottom,
Yeah.
he comes in his last entrance and has to. Some actors, I've done it. Edward Herrmann has done it, but return the chain of office,
Yeah.
the steward chain to Olivia, and I went so far as to kiss her on the cheek. But has a beautiful thing about "Lady, you have done me wrong, notorious
Yeah.
wrong," and you see that this man who has been sick of self-love is now just sick. He has been very wrong. The badly used Malvolio.
Yes. And Festi, who maybe we liked because they were on the side of the people that we, the partiers, is cruel at the end of this play. Is
The
just
whirligig of time
yeah,
brings such revenges, I think.
yeah,
And revenge is ugly. Revenge is ugly. No matter how hard he wronged them, it's hard for the audience to laugh. And then they say, "Oh, well, that isn't funny. I don't like that play." And it's like, look, guys, Shakespeare, we have to go up and meet him.
yeah,
He wants us to be upset. He
yes,
wants us to think that life is hard. He wants us to see all of this as a challenge. He wants us to laugh. He wants us to cry. And he didn't just write a comedy like, a Bugs Bunny cartoon or a skit on Carol Burnett. It's
it's not a
8 minutes
farce.
long. 8 minutes long. You cannot sustain just ha ha ha. I mean, I know Noises Off. I know One Man, Two Governors. But you don't feel that much for
No,
a lot of those people
yeah,
ever. And he wants us, because characterization is his passion,
yeah,
to feel a lot for
yeah,
these characters. Toby, who we kind of get a kick out of in a Falstaff way, turns out to be so mean and dark and violent. And Malvolio, who we hate or have fun hating,
mhm,
turns out to be rather vulnerable.
right. So we've got, we talk now, we're talking about clown, we talk about professional fool, and we're delineating them. And then there's just these comic creations, dramatic characters that we wouldn't classify in any way, shape, or form different than we would Hamlet or Lear or Rosalind or anybody else. And the king, I think, is Falstaff. And anybody who looks
That's
at
right.
his work will put him right up next to the big ones and say, that he does not have to look away, in terms of, the great dramatic creations, even though we know that the thing that defines Falstaff is a life force part. We'll talk about what that means in a second. You have had the opportunity in your life to play both Falstaff in his incredibly greatest guys in Henry IV Part 1 and 2, and then his maybe cameo on the slab in Henry V, and also in a very, very different play, in a comedy, which the legend has it was requested by the Queen herself because she liked him so much, to put him in a kind of
He
romantic
wanted to
comedy.
see Falstaff in love. And
Yeah,
he wrote a play in which love doesn't even exist except for the two young people.
right.
It's all lust and money,
Yeah, yeah,
because Falstaff, how do you, he's in love with Hal. I mean, not in a necessarily homosexual way, but he's in love with Hal. His whole heart
yeah,
is in one of his greatest speeches. He talks about, if I had 1,000 sons,
right.
he loves Dull Tearsheet. He loves Mistress Quickly. He does have a big heart, but he's mostly out for number one.
Right. Yeah,
His relationship with Hal is something else,
right.
because the arc of Henry IV, one of the arcs, is that Hal starts out basically in his fraternity at the Boar's Head, and then has to ultimately hang Falstaff's closest kind of second banana, Bardolph, and then reject the old man, which is, if you ever see it live or watch Orson Welles' movie, The Chimes at Midnight, it is heartbreaking. And the biggest compliment I ever got in my life was the Boston Globe said that this guy's a Falstaff for the ages, because they felt that I went into the zone and that, of brokenheartedness at the end of that. Funny. He really is a life force and hilarious and an alcoholic, but really loves, sex and food and wit.
Yeah.
You know, lives by his wit.
And a complex, and the life force thing. There's a great, one of our shared loves of in art. David Milch, the creator of Deadwood. When I was looking for things about that I remembered about people talking about what his life force is, and we know one of the great things about Falstaff is he's a inveterate, practiced and inveterate liar, and a wonderful one, the best of the bunch. And Milch says in a thing, he's talking about a character in Deadwood, and he's talking about lies and the life force. And he says, when I was younger, my idea of fun was to go to the bus station or to bars and listen to people lie. And then he says, that it's there was a hospitality in the exuberance of their language. Exaggeration didn't bother them. They felt it was of the essence. Yeah. The utter implausibility of the reality they invoked was to me a source of pure joy. It seemed the denial of death's dominion, right? And that's the thing we love about him, the denial of death's dominion. This guy in the middle of all of this, and all of the lies and everything else is something that is a force that we need and everybody's attracted to and wants to be a part of and around.
And we have talked about, how people fit into the different kind of clowns. And I said, well, it started, with the Greek, Roman, and then Commedia dell'arte. And there is a character in Commedia dell'arte, Capitano, who is the braggart knight, the braggart soldier, who really is a coward.
Yeah.
And how much he lies, and how much he, we see it on TV every night, just absolutely puffs up his own reputation beyond what it could possibly even ever be. So he is lovable in that we can recognize it from life automatically. And at the same time, I don't think you'd want to marry this guy. I don't think you'd want him even in your family, but he's, you can't look away.
Yeah. And it does take on a tragic dimension that is not any less powerful than Hamlet's or Lear's or anybody else's.
Absolutely. And so for a clown, if you're Jackie Gleason or Orson Welles or, he has to be huge. I had a giant fat suit in the days when I needed one. And you wonder, we've had many, many English greats, but the guy who wrote Invention of the Human, Harold Bloom, he happened to see in 1945, I believe at the Old Vic, Ralph Richardson, who was, I think, the Falstaff for the ages.
Yeah.
I think that he invented so many things that Shakespeare wrote, put in there, that he broke everybody's heart. He made everybody laugh. He was always a recognizable human. Mm-hmm. And, when we say clown, we always think Ringling Brothers, and that they're not human at all. And Shakespeare's works, they are really human. And
when you read criticism of it, and I was looking at some stuff, of different Falstaffs over the centuries, and they'll always, critics love to do this anyway, to talk about one aspect. Well, he really got this and he really got that, and then they talk about Richardson and if you're going to do it, you got to get it all. It's Hamlet. I mean, you got to do it all. You have
to do it all. And remember that I don't know what critics say because it's hard to read them, but when you read criticism, by the greats over the ages, they have said things like, oh, I didn't like his Hamlet because he wasn't princely enough. And you throw the book across the room, because if you're sitting out there with your arms folded saying, prove to me that you could be princely, you're going to miss every single ounce of talent this person is bringing to the stage.
Right. Heidi
your preconceived notions. And if you want them played the same, no matter when you see it, why come to the theater? It's going to be different because of the actor has a different mother, father, God.
Over and over again over 400 years. Heidi says, thanks, Tony and Fred, for reminding us at this moment, and this is the point, that it's okay to laugh and cry at the same time.
Oh, please. Yeah, please.
Thank you, Heidi. It's true, yeah, and it's what we do all the time, and we need more plays that we don't have to compartmentalize. We talked about this in earlier episodes that that when we talked about the Hamlet thing, that you're laughing kind of wall to wall in Hamlet until you're not. You know what I mean? And
somebody got mad at us. Actually, I played the Gravedigger, and we did kind of a Three Stooges thing, and we wore derbies, which is kind of a love letter to clowns becoming, in our day and age, or 50 years ago, Samuel Beckett, and but what are clowns? That's for Americans, that's silent movies and television, right? Yeah. So, they got mad because we were doing slapstick in the middle of Hamlet, and he says, "Enter clowns." Stephen Sondheim would say, "Send in the clowns." I lost a mentor within the past 2 weeks. And I've been talking to his daughter for a while now, a couple of weeks, and saying, is it okay to laugh? Is it okay to tell funny stories? And the Irish believe the wake should be hilarious. We're in a time that is so scary and terrifying. And I'm reading the history of Shakespeare today because I have 9,000 books in this room. And it was, these people died of the plague and then went on and did a play the next day. It's time to find the balance. And all of his plays are as complex as we all are. We always think that theater is so simple. Oh, this is a comedy. I have to laugh through it. Oh, this is a tragedy. And throughout his waves, and there were 4 major waves, and they were getting darker and more complex until we get to the romances, which just kind of get rid of all the tragic and just go to fairy tales. So he could write the most beautiful poetry that was in him, and he could treat us all like children. And I mean, crazy. We just worked on one, Cymbeline, last summer, and it was extraordinary. People don't know about Pericles or Cymbeline. We did The Winter's Tale at GAM, and then they said, why aren't these plays done all the time? Because out of the 4 of them, I think maybe Tempest is most popular.
And what is that? Jen asked the question earlier that I didn't get to. She said, can you talk about Cymbeline? And, what people will call, it's a problem, it's difficult. And it was a brilliant production. She says, how did you make it so? How did that happen when people want to why do we put these plays in boxes and then say they can only be this? We have a responsibility to reinvent them every time we go to see them. And certainly that production of Cymbeline was a version of that.
Why would you put a person or a poem or a work of art in a box? Why would you go with preconceived notions?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? To make yourself feel smart? I don't know. I used everything I've known since my first part at 15 into Cymbeline because I want to do all the plays before I die. I don't know if I'll be able to. I have 9 or 10 left. But and nobody does King John. I don't. But
coming to a theater near you.
Dude, that's not one of my 37. That's 38. I don't count Two Noble Kids. I'm actually going to watch it on
the Globe.
The Globe. I'm going to watch it just because it is as we love to say, a bald spot in my learning, and I want to know it. But I don't need to be in it. Anyway, I'd like the 37 that we know he wrote. Two Noble Kids, but is co-written, so is Henry VIII, I think. Anyway, back to my point. We are complex individuals. One cannot say you're just a lefty pinko gay guy. You have to know me well enough to know my troubles, my parents, my love life, and then I bring it to the stage and I try to make you laugh and I try to make you think and I try to make you cry. Hopefully all in the same play, whether it be Beckett or Eugene O'Neill or the king of all kings, Shakespeare. Why we still go dip into his well is that no one, in the modern day, we've got it down to Beckett or Pinter or the lovely people who are writing now, who are brilliant, like Carol Churchill and all the wonderful playwrights that Tony does. But Shakespeare, he has been devoted to since I met him, and that has fueled a lot of our friendship, because you could start thinking in Shakespeare. You could start to look at life through Shakespeare. He's very comforting. And that he had the best words. No one wants to hear what they say about Brutus or King Hamlet at any funeral ever again, but they are the best things you can say about somebody. He understood the complexities of love. He understood the complexities of humor, and that it always has a dark. So the Fools actually got darker and darker. We went to see Troilus and Cressida in the park together, Tony and I. And that clown was cleaning up pieces of humans after the battle, the Trojan War, and trying to make us laugh about how dark the situation was. And Tony and I just looked at each other and said, this actor knows how to do this. I mean, he's not trying to make it wacky or stupid or, when we say it's only funny if Lucy is really, really trying to get her foot out of the bucket, it's real. It's an action. It's somebody's point of view is serious. And because we all recognize it and it surprises us as true, we laugh. Rhythm and timing help, but and words. Nobody ever gave us any better words. I'm sorry I'm talking so much.
No, well, we are, we didn't even get to the greatest character, but we will at some point down the road. It's at just about 8:30. We're at our hour mark.
Oh no!
Well, please, this could happen all day. Thank you. I mean, and we've been doing this, I've been working with you on this stuff since I was knee high to a grasshopper, and I even learned new things tonight, Freddie. So thank you so much for bringing all of your life in this business in the art form, and your dedication to this particular author, and all of your experience, which is second to nobody. Thank you for sharing that with all of those watching. Thanks to Kristen and Matt again at Chez Pascal for collaborating with us on this. Please support your local businesses, your restaurants. Get out there. Make sure they're open when all of this goes through. I've got one more recommendation. There's a great article in the New Yorker today by Stephen Greenblatt about what Shakespeare was really doing in the plague. And maybe we can take some comfort in knowing between 1606 and 1610, towards the end of his career, in those 4 years, the theaters were probably open for about 9 months because of plague the whole time. It was tough. So, we're not there yet. Let's hope we don't get there. We'll be
They went
revisiting.
inside, right? They did the romances
They
inside
did go
Black
inside.
Fires. Yeah,
Yeah.
they weren't out of the globe. Goodbye globe.
Too many people.
We
So-
will do a thing someday called Chimes at Midnight, or
Chimes at Midnight, yeah.
Sir John, and we could just talk about him for 45 minutes.
He deserves his own, his own series, his own, Netflix series. False.
Dying to do it again anytime, anywhere.
We will, and we'll be back next week on Friday. We'll get you the promo, and we don't know what time yet, but we'll let you know. Thanks everybody. Thanks Chez Pascal. Thanks Connie and Terry, and you know why. And we will see you all soon. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Bye.